This
Recording if you want.
conference will now be recorded.
All right. So if you joined me last time, I'm super excited you decided to come back. I didn't totally scare you away, so that's good. And so we reviewed the last, and if you didn't join me last time, I should say, my name is Deanna Sylvester, and I am the project manager for the educator certification project that the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education has going on right now. And part of that project is helping people put together their teaching portfolio. So we're in the middle of it. We're in the middle of figuring out what goes into a portfolio. And last time we reviewed the core competencies for massage therapy educators, which the certification is based on. So you demonstrate competency in those standards in that document, and you're able to become a certified educator. And that basically the application process for certified educator right now involves a portfolio review process. And so that's why we're talking about teaching portfolios, because should you choose to apply for certification, you would want to put together an appropriate portfolio. So that's where we are. What'll happen is everyone's gonna just be on mute while I'm sort of talking and while I'm actually talking also. And then when you have a question or a comment, you'll type something in the chat. You can type questions in the chat anytime you want, or comments. But if you say, hey, I'd like to speak, Naomi will facilitate making sure you are off mute and able to talk to me directly, because I miss talking to people directly. So feel free to type in, but also if you want to talk, feel free to do that as well. Okay, so where we are is I thought we would, let's see if I can make this thing go. All right. I thought we would kind of start where we left off last time. And since this is the first time I've done this webinar series, I wasn't sure how long everything would take. So we went more than an hour last time. And I won't do that today. I think we'll keep it within the hour. What we get to, great. If it gets close to that hour, we'll save it for next week, the last week that we'll talk about these things. So that's my plan anyways. And so we'll talk about the various, okay, I have to move some screens because I want to see my slides too, and things are in my way. So one moment, let me figure out how to do this. What's this? Okay, we're good now. Okay, we're going to just kind of where we ended up last time and people had to drop off is that we were talking about the different ways that you would show evidence of competence in those standards that we reviewed. And then we'll talk about assessing your own competency in each of those sections. And then we're going to talk about the different items that go into the portfolio. During the application process for certification, we require a certain number of items, which would go in any teaching portfolio, but specifically we'll talk about what we're looking for if you choose to go through the application process and how to present those things. So here we go. Let's try it. Having trouble making it go forward. Okay, here we go. So I did talk about this a little bit last time, but I'll just throw it out there again. The types of things you want to think about as a teacher in being able to show, like, here's my, an artist puts together a portfolio, things that they've painted and stuff. They probably aren't picking their worst painting ever. They're probably picking their best stuff. So think about that as a teaching portfolio. It's like, you want to talk about your philosophy and how you believe in, what you believe in, why you're teaching. You probably didn't get in, I'm just going to guess right now that you probably didn't get in teaching to be a billionaire. You probably got in teaching because you care about what you're doing so much that you decided to work long hours for little pay to help others love it too. I'm just guessing. That's what happened to me. And that's what happens to a lot of teachers I talk to. So you know, you might want to talk about that in your teaching portfolio, your passion for it. And the documentation of what you actually have done, your experience, the course documentation that you use in your classes, things like that. And also what other people think of your teaching. So you have evaluations done by your students on a regular basis, probably. And then what about your colleagues or your supervisor and and other people who have experienced your teaching? What do they think? And usually what you pick the folks that really think you're great to write you a letter of recommendation. But not just who really think you're great, but people who can speak to your competency in these particular teaching standards. So we'll get to that when we talk about letters of recommendation and what you ought to ask them to do when you go to pick your recommenders. But other things like, you know, you want to document what are your licenses that you already have, your certifications, any degrees that you have, things like that. If you have written an article in Massage Magazine, for example, you might say that and put that in a copy of it in your teaching portfolio. So those are things you would add to it. Those might not all be required in the application process for our particular teaching certification, but it's really nice to have that complete portfolio of everything you feel like contributes to who you are as a teacher, as an educator. Make sense? Hopefully. And these are the kind of the documents where we might find and items where we might find the evidence that we're talking about, and these are the documents we're pretty much going to talk about today. So you probably have a resume or a CV. Most educators now are going the CV model, where you're really detailing the types of teaching activities. You're talking about teaching experience more than just job experience. And it's characterized a little bit differently. Your written course materials, your lesson plans, assessments that you do with your students, and we'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about the different types of assessments, because you have to demonstrate different types of assessments in your portfolio. Video recordings, we're going to hit on that mostly next week, our final session. We'll talk about what to put in your video recordings, maybe how to do them. And especially if you wanted to try to do a video recording in this environment. All right, I have no idea why that happened. Okay, there we go. In this environment where you're not with your students right now. So we'll talk a little bit about that next week. And we'll talk about evaluations and letters of recommendation. And next week, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what goes into your statement of interest. And that's part of the application process, but it's something you should have. It's like having a mission statement. So we're going to talk a lot about that next week, but I wanted to include that here before we got going. And then I hit on a little bit, and so this isn't really a review of the core competencies, but I hit on a little bit at the end last time about what questions you should be asking yourself when you're wondering, do I even qualify for certification if you're interested in applying, or do I really meet these standards? Am I competent in this? I mean, if this is the kind of the set standard, like this is what it means to be a good teacher, do I do these things? So I highly recommend that you're asking yourself these questions as they relate to the different sections or categories in the core competencies. So remember that the first three standards had to do with the learner and learning. And so you should ask yourself, remember the KSAs stand for knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So you should ask yourself, what do I know about learning development, learning differences, the different types of approaches? What do I know about learning environments? I think if you tried honestly to answer those questions, you're going to find that you know quite a lot. You know what's conducive to a learning environment. You know what's not conducive to a learning environment if you've been in the classroom any number of times. And so if I know those things, how do I actually demonstrate that knowledge? What am I doing in the classroom to provide a safe learning environment, for example? So just, journal your answers to these types of questions. And then, and especially the third section, what are my attitudes about this? Do I believe in these different theories of learning development, or do I believe in the integrative approaches that are talked about in the core competencies? And what's my attitude towards safe and secure learning environments and things like that? So definitely answering those questions for yourself, about yourself. And then you're going to find that you do meet a lot of these, probably all of the standards. And then, okay, so how do I show evidence of that? So potential evidence, your resume, what you've written in your personal statement. You're going to show your syllabus, your learning objectives, your lesson plans. Lesson plans are really a good way to show that you understand a learning environment, because you're going to talk about what the learning environment looks like today in this block on your lesson plan. So things like that. So these are all the different things that we ask for in an application, and all the different things that we've talked about exist in a really complete teaching portfolio. And so those are the things you're going to pull evidence for these different categories. So far, so
a
good.
quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, so far so good for me. I think you're doing great. So quick question from Timothy. He asked if you know of any resources for putting together a CV if you just hadn't put one together before.
I'm sure there are a lot of resources. You could Google it, but one place, and Naomi, I'm probably going to ask for your help on this, but we have a teacher resource directory on our website, and I believe that was being worked on recently. Is it back up and available? Because you used to be able to do a search on that for different resources, and I'm curious if maybe we have some resources already on our website for that.
That's
and
a good point.
I promised to look it up. Right.
It's a timely question. So actually, we are revamping our teacher resource directory. We're in the final stages of finishing up some changes to both it and our continuing education course directory. And so actually, we're hoping it'll be next week that we're able to send an email out to folks and let them know that they're able to access them. The teacher resource directory, one of the changes is it will be member only. So that is one of the new changes. So only members will be able to actually see the resources that are posted into it. But I could also take a look. I've got kind of a spreadsheet already of the new resources that are coming, and I could take a look and see if there is a CV resource, because they actually very well might already have one. And so I'd be happy to send that to Timothy if I find one.
Yeah, if you find it, copy me on that, because I'll try to share it with the folks that are on here in case. And if we don't have it in our resource directory, that'll be a great thing. And I put it on my list to look up resources for writing CVs, so that we can put it in that resource directory and also send it out to you guys. So excellent question. Those are the kind of things we're trying to do as an organization, is find out what teachers are looking for, what teachers need out there, and try to provide resources in areas where you can look things up as best we can. So thanks for asking that, Timothy, and I will get back to you with what we find. Any other questions in the chat box so far? Are we good? All right. So the second category in the standards was about content. So same type of questions you're going to ask yourself as you're doing your self-evaluation. What do I know about my course content? What do I know about applying that content knowledge in the classroom? And if I know that stuff, how do I demonstrate it? What am I doing in the classroom that shows I have a handle on my content and I know how to help somebody else learn it? That's the two kernels of this category. And what are my attitudes about this content? I think it's pretty easy for students to tell if you really love what you're talking about, or you're just teaching what's on the lesson plan for the day because you got assigned this class and you really don't care about it. You should check what your attitudes are. And if it's not your favorite subject, because I'm also not making an argument for only teaching everything you love and ignoring everything else. There are some things we got to teach because it helps a therapist to be the best therapist they can, and maybe it's not your favorite or your first choice for teaching. So you do need to know what your attitudes are toward the content that you're sharing. And if it's less than enthusiastic, what would you need to do to be the best teacher with that stuff? So that's another idea of why you would want to be asking yourself what your attitudes are. You know, we're not going to love everything. It's not going to be our favorite everything, but we can understand the importance of it, and we can teach from that attitude if we know what our attitudes are. So that whole self-reflection, self-evaluation piece is really important as part of the assessment, self-assessment. So again, lots of these same things could demonstrate the actual evidence that you meet these competencies by being able to answer these questions with things that you know and do and what your attitudes are. And then the third category had to do with instruction and practice. So what do I know about planning for instruction? What do I know about delivering that instruction? What do I know about assessing students? And assessing myself? Is what I'm doing effective? Are these folks learning anything? I'm thinking that as I'm staring to a blank screen rather than, 18 students in my classroom. And then what are my attitudes towards all of those things? And if I know and understand this, what am I doing in the classroom, or what am I doing in my preparations for the classroom that demonstrate that? So writing your lesson plans or figuring out how to apply this lesson plan, what does that look like? So that's your skills piece. You can demonstrate in videos, things like that. Your students can write it in their evaluations, potentially. And then that last category having to do with professional responsibility ethics. So what do I know about professional development? Do I know about the world of professional development out there? What do I know about appropriate ethical conduct? Do I collaborate? So if I know about these things, how do I do that? What does it look like? And what's my attitude toward that? I never want to talk to anybody. I want to make all my own decisions. Well, if that's your attitude, then that's probably a specific attitude about collaboration. You might want to, evaluate that, see if that's working for you. So, and then again, just my list of, hey, these could be resources where you will find the evidence for these standards. So that's why we're talking about these particular items that go in your teaching portfolio, because we want you to be able to demonstrate that you got this. You likely have it, you just haven't ever had to explain it before, maybe. So let's assemble some evidence. How's that sound? Maybe some of you got started doing this since if you joined me last week, maybe you spent this whole week on nothing but assembling evidence for your teaching portfolio because you had nothing else important to do, right? I wish I could see your faces right now, but right now I have all these other weird screens up and I don't want to mess anything up by clicking anywhere, but I'm hoping you're giggling with me. Of course, you have plenty of other things to be doing, but I wanted to just kind of organize our thoughts around the items in your portfolio. There are items that you probably already have in some form. It may not be called lesson plan, but you have some kind of plan for how you're going to spend your time in this particular class on this particular day. So you probably already have a resume or a CV. You probably already have a syllabus or a course outline or some semblance of that for your course. You probably already have lesson plans or some kind of plan written out for what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. You probably already have assessments, even if you don't call them that, even if you don't give official tests in your class. Let's say you're a CE provider and you're sharing information, but maybe you don't have written tests. But you do have assessments, and we'll talk about what those are later. Trust me, you have them. And then the evidence that your students are learning are these assessments. So in actual written tests, you would want to demonstrate that your students actually took the test. So you would make a copy of the test that a student filled out. This is what it looks like. This is the evidence that the student is actually learning because they took this assessment, and this is the grade they got. Now, other types of assessments that don't include a written test, student evidence might look a little different. So we'll talk about that in a little while. Your instructor evaluations, that may be something you have and that you keep, or it may be something you need to get from someone else. So if the administration at the institution you work at conducts instructor evaluations, maybe they have those documents and they either share them with you or they share a summary with you. And so you may need to procure those documents for your teaching portfolio in another way if you don't have possession of it yourself. So there are items you need to get from others. And in particular, the letters of recommendation. You want at least 2 letters of recommendation speaking to your ability to teach. And so when you're putting something together like a teaching portfolio, if you've got to rely on somebody else for any piece of it, my idea would be go request those things ahead of time, even if you haven't written your statement of interest yet or whatever, because you have control over your time, but you don't have control over their time. So reach out and try to get those things you need from others first, and then work on assembling your other things. And then items you might not have, but need to create for your teaching portfolio. A lot of us didn't, if we started teaching a long time ago, we didn't have neat little video recorders on our phones. So a lot of us don't have video recordings of our teaching. So that might be something you need to create, is get somebody to videotape you. And you probably want to pick one of those classes that's your favorite to teach, or that you really feel like you demonstrate a particular standard, one of the core competencies, or one or more of the core competencies, that when you go to demonstrate that in the video, or when you are videotaping, you want to demonstrate that in the video. So pick a section of that course, because you can only turn in a video that's about a little bit more than 5 minutes long, less than 10 minutes. So you want to pick a section of that course that says, yeah, I'm pretty sure this that I demonstrated these standards in that video. You get to turn in 2 videos as part of the application process, so it's you could do more than one. And then your statement of interest, I highly recommend you write that last, after you've accumulated everything else and assessed yourself and say, I have pretty good evidence on all of these things except standard 10. I really haven't demonstrated really good. So once you know that you want to have a little more evidence for one or more of the standards, make sure you highlight that in your statement of interest. So I recommend doing that last, and it gives you time to take notes when you're accumulating your items and stuff. So I think we have a question in the chat box. Hang on, let me check.
We have 2 questions. Yeah.
So for the letters of recommendation questions, is there more than one? Maybe you should read it to me, Naomi, because I don't want to miss one. I only can see one at a time.
Okay, yeah. So we've got 2 questions. There is one about letters of recommendation. And basically the question is, when folks are asking for their letters of recommendation, are there guidelines for what belongs within the letter of recommendation? So whatever people should be speaking to,
Yeah, I'm going to cover that in a little bit. And yeah, there isn't necessarily a form that you might be asking if there's a form that they fill out, but I will, in a few slides, I'll be making suggestions for what you might want to give them when you ask them to write your letter, so that they can use language that's similar to the core competencies, because you want them to be able to say, I've seen this person meet these competencies and here's how. So something like that. So you do want, and people who write letters of recommendation, I have to write a lot of them, and we love to know, what do you want us to say? So it's okay to make those requests, like, hey, do you mind writing a letter? Do you feel like you could comfortably write a letter of recommendation to speak to my teaching skills and knowledge? And if so, would you mind if I gave you a copy of the core competencies that I'm being evaluated against? I mean, you could literally give them a link to the PDF, and it might overwhelm them. You might just give them, you know, a Cliff Notes version of it, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But does that kind of cover, sort of answer those questions till we talk a little bit more?
I think it answers the one question. The second question was actually to do more with recommendations for people who follow a syllabus or lesson plans or adopt them rather than write their own. Do people actually need to write their own, or what if they follow other ones?
Nope, you don't have to write your, if you work in an institution, a lot of people do work in an institution where the administration or the people who wrote the curriculum give you the lesson plans to follow, or give you the syllabus. Maybe you decide what happens that day, but maybe you got all of the documentation for the course is given to you, and any number of combinations of that. And certainly you don't, if you're using and teaching a course that you didn't write the lesson plans for, you didn't write the syllabus or the course outline, that's okay. You're still going to submit those as the course content that you use. And what you might also submit with those is a description or an addition to those things if you feel like it doesn't fully explain you as a teacher. So we'll talk about that in just a second when we get to those items. That's a great question, because that is something that we see in today's massage education world, is some people don't write their own, or haven't had the opportunity to, or maybe you collaborate with the other folks in your team and you all write them together, and that's also something that happens. So good question. We'll talk about that in a second. One of the things that you need, the reason you want to have your resume or your CV as part of your teaching portfolio is because that's most likely going to contain a lot of the information that's needed in our little online application. You enter everything online, and a lot of the things we ask for is, what's your teaching experience? What's your licenses, certifications, registrations that you already, degrees that you already have? Things that are optional, aren't required, but may be applicable because it exists in your resume or your CV, are maybe your professional affiliations, if you're a member of the Alliance, for example, or maybe AMTA, ABMP, one of those things. If you have done any teacher training, completing a formal teacher training program isn't a requirement to apply for certification. But if you have done that, you would want to put that there's a box in the application process for that. And the reason why, and there's no place where you have to upload your resume or your CV, but I recommend having that first and foremost, because there's probably things in there that you can just copy and paste right into the online application. Now, if you're not applying for certification, you're just putting together your teaching portfolio, you absolutely want to have that as part of it. But things that exist in either your resume or your CV would need to include all of these things. Absolutely, your teaching experience and any certifications and licenses you already have. Those are primary. And your education, if you've had any education in teaching, a lot of us haven't, not specifically in teaching, but all of us have education in massage or whatever our primary focus area in the area that we teach. We have some kind of education in our course content, and so you definitely want to demonstrate that. So that's the reason. And then the picture that I have on here is actually a picture of the checklist that you can download from our website. Many of you already have, that that says here's what to keep track of as part of your application for certification, but it might also just be a nice checklist to have as here's what I should have in my teaching portfolio for whatever reason you might be putting that together. So there's that. Hey, if you have any special recognitions or awards, you got to put that stuff in there. This is the time you brag about yourself, right? I'm a great teacher and here's how. I have all of these cool things, right? Normally teachers are pretty humble, but this is the time to brag about yourself. Okay, so syllabi, if you write your own, that's great. If you have an outline that you use so that it matches everybody else in the school, or if someone writes those for you and you're given maybe the class schedule like this example on here shows, and you know that's the order in which you'll be teaching things, that's what's expected of you as an instructor for this course, then you want to make sure you know how to deliver that. So providing the syllabus shows a few things you know about what's required for a course. So this is about knowledge. Your skill set is applying it, not necessarily writing it. Okay, so that's how if you haven't written your own, but you do use them in your classroom. Now, if you're teaching and you don't have something called a syllabus that you hand out to students, or a course outline, or something that describes the policies and procedures of your class, or maybe the grading policies, anything that might go in what we call a syllabus, that's what you're going to turn in, that's what you're going to upload as part of your portfolio and call it a syllabus or call it a course outline, because that's what it is. So something that describes the course, has the course description, has your learning objectives in it, has a general outline for what the students can expect and how they'll be graded. Things like that belong in a syllabus. Whether you wrote it or not, you as the teacher are responsible for everything in it. And so that's why it's should be part of your teaching portfolio. Does that make sense? Hopefully. It's not about how good you wrote the syllabus, it's about how well you understand and apply it. And certainly if you write your own syllabi and you don't have all those elements in it, you might consider adding some things.
Right. One question that came up on the chat, and it's not about the syllabus, but it was about something that you mentioned, the awards and special recognition. Now, is this required? What if an individual doesn't have any awards or special recognition for their portfolio?
It's totally not required. There are, I think, 3 boxes in the application process that are optional, so you don't have to put anything in those boxes, one of which is the awards or special recognition. I'm going to go back one slide because, oops, why is it going forward? Help me. Okay, got it. There we go. These 3 bullet points on the bottom, professional affiliations, teacher training, and awards and special recognition, those aren't things that are required as part of the application, but we allow people to tell us about those things if they do exist in your teaching portfolio. So certainly if you haven't had any awards or special recognitions, that doesn't mean you're not a great teacher and that you aren't competent in all of the competencies. But if you do, it's like I said, this is a way to brag about yourself and you can put it in there. Formal teacher training programs or an education degree is not required, but if you have that, you might put it in the teacher training section, but it's not required. You're not required to belong to any professional organizations, but if you do, there's a spot for it. So I wouldn't worry too much if you don't have awards or special recognition or anything like that. I would be curious though, if you don't have any professional affiliations, what your attitude toward collaboration is. So it might inform how you feel about standard 10, for example, where it talks about collaboration and things like that. So you might, as you're going through, think about it for yourself. Well, I haven't been to the AMTA convention in a few years. I wonder if that's something I should do. So those kind of things.
Well, and one more question that just came up in the chat while we're talking about professional affiliation. So Leah has asked, do we sign up as a member and then go sign up for educator certification? And, you know, I thought it was timely just because obviously the AFMT is one of the professional affiliations that people may have. So
Right. So to answer your question, you don't have to be a member of the Alliance to apply for certification. If you are a member of the Alliance, the application fee is, I believe, $50 less than non-members. So there's a members application fee and a non-members application fee. But you definitely don't have to be a member. If you are a member, you would want to, or if you want to be a member, you would want to sign up for membership ahead of time, because then when you go to apply for certification, you get that application fee as $50 less. So yeah, that's the order of operations if you wanted to do that, but certainly you don't have to be a member to be. We actually, you know, our secret mission is to have every teacher certified in every massage classroom all over the country, because we have a theory that students are going to become better therapists or practitioners if they've been taught by someone who really understands how to teach. So that's the theory. As we have more and more certified educators over time, we're going to be able to collect that data and see if we're right. Right? That's what research is all about. We think that's true. We don't know if it's true because we don't have a bunch of certified educators in the classrooms yet, but we do have a lot of really experienced, awesome educators out there. So if you guys are, you know, if I get you on my soapbox and you go out and you get certified and you tell everybody else, tell all your friends, hey, you're competent in all these things too, let's get on board. So that would be my soapbox to preach from as far as why you might want to get certified. But certainly you don't have to be a member of the Alliance, and you don't have to be certified to be a great teacher. We just think that eventually we'll be able to demonstrate that certified classrooms are more successful, and we'll measure what we mean by success later as we generate that data. But yeah, all right.
well, and one more thing worth mentioning, you know, obviously a lot of people are ABMP members, and if you're an ABMP member, then you can also receive an additional $100 savings on your application fees. Just so you know, a lot of people don't know about that promotion, so that is available. And then one question, would you be able to provide a sample portfolio that could be a model?
Yeah. Let me speak to the ABMP thing really quick first. ABMP is running a promotion right now where they will pay $100 of your application fee if you're a member, and that you have to be an individual member, I think, of ABMP, not a school, not just work at a school who's a member. So there's that. But if you are a member, take advantage, because they're really only doing that for the first 50, I think. We've got a handful of applicants so far, but we haven't reached that limit yet. So consider that if you're, because they're going to pay $100 for you. It's not even a reimbursement thing. You pay your portion and I bill them for your $100. So that's a really good promotion. So there's that. And then the sample portfolio. This has been an argument within our organization for some time, so I'm not going to go into it all. But right now, on purpose, we don't have any sample portfolios up on the website, because we're leery of people maybe thinking that's what the ideal portfolio looks like and copying it, and maybe deciding not to put something in that they didn't see in the sample that would have actually really been great to put in. So we're still debating that, but that's why we don't right now, because we would hate to keep you in a box within that model. And in order to not do that, we'd have to put a whole bunch of different types of models online. And so we just haven't come to any conclusions about doing that yet. That's a great question, and that's why you don't see one right now. So. I see that there's a question about the timeline on the ABMP promotion. There is a timeline they've given us till the end of June. So, or if we hit that 50 people max before June, then they're done. But yeah, they've said 50 people or 6 months. Wait, yeah, 6 months. Now, the chances are I could make an argument for that to be extended because of our current national crisis that we're all part of. But I'm not sure yet. So I would say if you're considering that, you might reach out to ABMP directly, or just pay your application fee within that promotion now, even if you're not ready to turn in your portfolio yet. Some people have done that actually. So.
Well, and Jeanette just followed up. And this is actually a very commonly asked question. Is there a time limit to apply after you kind of pay all the application fee? I think this is her question.
Yeah. I understand, and that's I get that question a lot too. And I have a handful of people who've applied who have yet to turn in their completed portfolio because they weren't ready to do that, but they wanted to take advantage of that thing. And right now we don't have a time limit. So for example, if you paid your application fee tomorrow, I would start bugging you to turn in your, I'll be completely honest, I'll start bugging you to turn in your portfolio or ask you what you're working on, or hey, have you made your videos yet? You'll get all of those questions from me. But there won't be a slamming the door thing that happens. You turn it in when you feel ready. And we have the online portal for uploading all your parts of your portfolio is open as soon as your application fee's paid. So no, we don't have a time limit yet. I won't say that'll be forever. I mean, the board of directors may decide that, hey, we need everything to be done in a certain time frame. And of course, I'll communicate that to you guys right away if any decisions have been made, but I'm not aware of any change at this time. So there's that. Okay, looks like, I've got 20 minutes left, or less than 20 minutes left to talk about a few more things. So let's dive into lesson plans a little bit. Part of your lesson plans include other things besides just the kind of the outline for what I gotta stop my computer from trying to interrupt me. Don't do that. Okay, so kind of describing what you do with your time, what you're going to do with your time today. Let's say you have a 3-hour class. What are you doing with that time today to address a specific topic or set of topics, or how are you covering this material that you've planned for the day? That's what a lesson plan is. If you don't call that a lesson plan, I bet you have something that you've written down that says, this is what I'm doing on Saturday, and we're going to spend, I'm going to spend 20 minutes going over this stuff, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break, and people are going to get ready to get on the table. That's going to take about 10 minutes, or, you have a set amount of time, and then when it's time to switch, you've got that time figured out because you know kind of what fits in your class. That's your lesson plan, the description of how you spend your time. Okay, so part of that would be what you're spending your time on, how you are assessing yourself and your students for whether or not this is working. Is anybody getting what I'm talking about? Part of that is part of your lesson plan, and that might not be something you've written out before. So how am I assessing whether or not the students are getting what they're getting? I'm observing, so you might write that down, that during trades when we are practicing, whatever trigger points or something, and I'm observing the students applying pressure for the, you might have to beef up your lesson plans a little bit to kind of describe what you're doing. What are you looking for when you're assessing students, things like that. So that's the idea for, you probably already have lesson plans, but you might want to beef them up a little bit so that somebody who isn't sitting in your classroom can really understand what do you have planned for this? What do you have planned for this day? So part of your lesson plans is going to be how you are assessing your students? How do you know if they're learning? And there's two types of assessments that are asked for in the application process, and I highly recommend you think about these because you're already doing them. Okay, so there are summative assessments and formative assessments, and how I remember those terms is the educational terminology. When you're learning Latin and Greek for your anatomy class, it's kind of similar to that, right? So summative assessments are the sum total of everything you've taught them all along in this course. That's what a summative assessment is. So that might be your end of term final exam. That might be a practical where they've learned all of these different steps and now they're going to apply their massage, and their whole practical exam is giving a massage, including all of these things. That's what a summative assessment is. You're trying to determine, did the student learn? How much of the stuff I taught did the student learn? And it's kind of like you've already done all the teaching, and now it's time to tell how it went. Formative assessments are things you probably do every day and you never call them formative assessments. These types of assessments are happening while the learning is being formed. That's how I remember this word, right? So as you're teaching and observing, you're observing how the students are hearing you lecture. You're observing how they are watching you demonstrate something, right? You're observing how they are applying what you've demonstrated. And sometimes you need to make adjustments. So you see that nobody is getting this technique you just taught them. You're going to have to adjust what you're teaching in the moment, or maybe decide that Thursday we were going to move on, but we're not. We're going to do this again because we have to do this again, right? So that's a formative assessment. You've just changed your teaching based on what you're observing in the classroom. And it might be for everybody, or it might be for that one individual student. You're going to help them because they didn't quite get it and everybody else did. So formative assessments are as you go along. You might give a little quiz when everybody shows up about what you taught them yesterday. See how much they held on to see if you need to alter today's lessons a little bit. So that's the difference between those. And so when you're giving an example of a summative assessment, you might just turn in a copy of the final exam you use in that class. That's demonstrating that you have a summative assessment. The formative assessments might be something you don't document. Maybe you have your students write in a journal each day, but how would you provide evidence of that? Well, you might need to make some photocopies of journal entries and omit the student's name so that you're protecting their privacy, but that's how you might demonstrate that you apply that. Or if part of your formative assessment is observing them doing massage, then you might need to write a description of how you're assessing them, because there isn't really a paper trail of evidence. That's just something you're doing. And if you're giving them a quiz, and even if you're not grading the quiz or collecting it, you might turn in, here's the quiz I give them every few weeks or every week to assess our progress. So showing your example or evidence of your formative assessments might be something you need to describe because you haven't really written anything down like that before. So that's kind of the difference. So in our assessment guide for assessing educators that's downloadable from the website too, there's a quote in there, and I can't remember who said it, so sorry about that. They said formative assessments are when the cook tastes the soup. Summative assessments are when the customer tastes the soup. So how I interpret that is, if the cook is tasting the soup, they have a chance to make a change to what they've done. It's in the formation of the thing, right? But by the time the customer tastes the soup, it's too late, right? Now we know how the customer feels, what they're experiencing, but we don't have a chance to change it. They've already, so summative assessment is what we've been able to teach the students and what they've held on to, and the class is over, right? So now we know. So like MBLEX would be an example of a summative assessment for our whole programs, right? Crazy. We won't get into that right now. We don't have time. Let's see. So besides putting an example of how you do your assessments or an example of the actual assessment. You're going to want to turn in evidence that the students actually did it. So in the application process, if you apply for certification, it asks for graded student evidence. And there's been a lot of questions around this because people say, well, I don't grade my tests. I give them a test, but I don't grade it. Or maybe I don't even give them a test. I just do observations, especially trickier for CE providers who have different requirements or maybe different objectives that they meet than those of us who teach in entry-level programs that are really, you really do have to grade your students on a lot of things. So, but the student evidence, when we're asking for graded evidence, you don't have to turn in things that are graded. You don't have to make up something that's graded. What you do want to do is show us that your students did it. So if it's a quiz or a test or something, like I've thrown up a few questions or through few pictures here of maybe you wrote down some questions on the board and you had them answer them on a piece of paper, 1 through 5 or whatever that says, 1 through 5 looks like. Then maybe you make a copy of one of your students or several of your students who did that quiz, even though you aren't collecting them, you're not grading them or whatever they wrote down. Grab some copies of those and omit the student's name to protect their privacy, and it's none of our business who's taken the test. But then you have an example, you have evidence that you actually have students and that they participated in this. Because besides the video evidence, if students exist in the video, you can write all of this stuff and never apply it in the classroom. Now, I highly doubt that you could do that and get away with it. But what I'm saying is we need to see evidence that students actually existed throughout this process. So maybe you have them do a journal entry and you collect a few of them and make copies or whatever. And also, I don't know a lot of the ways that you might be handling your assessments. And so if you have unique ways that you do assessments and you're wondering how to document those, call me up and let's have a conversation about it. And we'll talk about what I think the reviewers that review portfolios might say about those things and how best to present it, because I can't imagine all of the different ways you're probably assessing your students, but we do need some kind of evidence that the students participated in this. So whether it's a graded test or whether it's something that you need to collect and make copies of because it's not something that you normally document, you might want to do that. So were there any questions around that aspect, Naomi?
Yeah, and I just want to, if you can confirm, and I might have even worded it a little poorly in the chat, it's my understanding that they provide a description of the formative and summative assessments and then provide uploads and uploads of their student evidences that are graded or completed. Is that correct?
That's right. So you have the opportunity to upload your actual assessment or a description of your actual assessment, what you do, and then you'll have another place to upload a separate document or a series of documents that are the graded or student evidences that the students participated. So yeah, that's actually two separate things. You'll have your formative assessment and then your evidence of that, and you'll have your summative assessment and you'll have your evidence of that. So did I answer that? I think you described it on the chat.
Yeah, I think we got it. I think we got it.
We're doing good. That's good. All right. And then instructor evaluations. This might be, like CE providers, if you are NCB approved provider, you're required to collect evaluations. In most institutions, entry-level institutions that I'm aware of, every term you're collecting evaluations. So you want to go back to the last time you taught this course. If you're turning in a particular course as part of your portfolio, you want to go back to whatever your most recent evaluations were for that course and grab those and make copies of them. Now, some institutions don't give you the actual copies. They might give you a summary. Here's what your student said in summary, and they loved you, or whatever it is. You can turn in a summary of evaluations if you're not allowed to see the handwritten ones or whatever it is. So there are different ways. I like the idea of if you have the actual evaluations, scanning all of those and throwing them in a PDF and uploading the whole thing. Because as a portfolio reviewer, I like to see, you know, all of the different things that students may say or choose not to say. And it's interesting because you know in your evaluations how, you know, everybody's going to love you, and then this one person didn't like the thing you said about such and such, and your whole evaluation reflects on that. That's kind of cool to see. And just so you know, the people reviewing your portfolios are teachers just like you, so they know what it's like to stand up there and bare your heart, and then somebody picks on one thing. But that's how we learn, right? Because if 5 people said that, we're gonna pay attention, and we're gonna maybe change something we did in our classroom. But so I just kind of like seeing all of those different things when I'm reviewing portfolios. But if you don't have that and you have a summary, that's also fine. So just wanted to make that clear. Anyways, it's fun to see how people interpret what you do. I think I should have made an evaluation. I will by next time, so you guys can tell me, you know, this was a waste of my 3 Thursdays, or here's what we think you should do next time. Okay, so I will be prepared to be evaluated next time. Okay, we're on letters of recommendation. We have 3 minutes left, and so that's why we're going to end here and pick up from here next Thursday. Okay, so you're going to ask some folks to write a recommendation for you, and I highly recommend you pick someone who has experienced you as a teacher. Maybe not just your best friend who loves you, but someone, and if they're an educator themselves, that'd be really great, because then they have some understanding of what you go through and how you got to where you are and things like that. So maybe your supervisor, or maybe it might be an administrator if they're part of the education team. I think that'd be great. Or it might be one of your colleagues who you've been teaching alongside of for a long time that could, that has observed you, or maybe would be willing to observe you, and who really can comment on the competencies. So the most important thing is, hey, I think you're a great this person's a great teacher. They should be certified. They've been teaching this many years. These are the things they teach. This is something I've seen them do in the classroom. But if they could say in that letter that that they exemplify, you know, standard 4, 5, and 6, and I've observed this myself, and have any of the language from the core competencies in that letter, I would highly recommend giving them a copy of the core competencies so they know what they're speaking to. And it doesn't have to, I mean, certainly don't let them write a book, but if they can fit in the one page that kind of highlights the things you're the best at and really is able to speak to one or more of those standards, I think that would be the ideal type of letter of recommendation. So I don't know if you want to give them the whole core competencies document. As you know, that's kind of a lot, unless they're an educator who's also considering this process. If they're also a massage educator, it might be helpful to them to read that and see and evaluate themselves. So I would recommend that that they have some kind of idea about what you're going for here. You're trying to demonstrate competency in these things. Do you guys mind taking a look at it? So that's what I would recommend as far as asking for letters of recommendation. Make sense? Okay. So next time, we're going to hit a couple more items. We're going to talk about making videos, and we're going to talk about your statement of interest, and we're going to talk about portfolio review. What does that look like? What are people looking for, and who are these people anyways that are going to be looking at my portfolio? So we'll talk about those things next time, but that's pretty much all I have for today. And I think we squeezed it exactly in 1 hour. Oh my gosh. Now, if you have any other questions as the week goes on, email me, deanna@afmte.org. You probably got your little invitations from my email address. Just hit reply and it'll come to me. So if this is stuff you're interested in, let's get together next Thursday and talk about videos and statements of interest and all that other stuff too. So thanks for being here, you guys. Naomi, you want to add anything, or are we good?
Muted. Great job. It's always fun when you start rambling off and you're like, wait, I'm muted. I think that covers everything. Just a reminder, we will be, posting this into our blog on our website, and we'll be sure to, email out the link probably tomorrow of the recording, just in case you want to go back through and get a refresher from the recording.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and healthy in your environments, wherever you are. Talk to you next week.